Hello and welcome to the Curators Salon podcast. I'm Vita Joshi and my guest today is London art critic Tabish Khan. Welcome, Tabish.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So let's start how you got into becoming known as the London art critic. How did that all come about?
One thing that a lot of people may not know is my day job, and still my day job, is I work in the energy and utility sector with a very standard office job. And what used to happen was I used to commute, as most office workers do, on the underground, and you would look up and you would see those adverts on the tube that said exhibition at Royal Academy, Tate, National Gallery. And I used to think to myself, well, that's something interesting that I should try and check out, because much like a lot of people of Asian origin, I did not go to a lot of exhibitions, and my parents weren't particularly into it, so I only saw them through school. So it had been many years since I'd been to an exhibition. So I started going, and I really enjoyed it. And it was quite broadening as well, because it's something I hadn't experienced, and it was something new that I could try out. So I really enjoyed this, and I got a bit of a bug, and I started going to more and more. And after a while, a cousin said to me, she said, "Why don't you write your own blog?" And this was when blogs were still relatively new. So I set up my own blog and started writing and was really enjoying it. And then I was looking for how to get more traction for my blog, because, you can't really get much traction if you start your own blog. So I did that, and I set up my own Twitter account. And then I looked for someone who'd publish my writing. And at the time, Londonist was a very young website, which most of the writers were unpaid. So I just pitched at them. I said, would you like me to write for you? And their view was, sure, we haven't got an arts writer at all, it'd be great to have you on board. The irony being that Londonist, as the professional outfit it is today, with all the writers paid, would never hire someone who had so little experience as I had back then. So I caught them at the right time, and I've been working with them for 7 years. And then Fad, who I've been with about 5 years, I met Mark, who runs it, at a random private view. It wasn't a random private view, it was Degree Art on Viner Street. And we decided that it'd be great if I started doing a top 5, and that's still going even to this day. So that's how I got into it, and I'm still enjoying it. I haven't lost the bug 7 years later, which is a sign for me that it's something that I should keep pursuing.
And I know you've built a massive network as well.
Yes, I think so. And I think it's, well, thank you. And it helps in the sense that you can grow these networks, especially with Twitter, now with Instagram. I had that very sad moment because I started on Twitter first, but my Instagram followers just surpassed my Twitter followers last week. So that's big news for me. And it's growing very fast. And also, once you've got those networks that are outside of where you write, it's also another feather to your cap that you can take with you anywhere. So it's always good to have those sort of diverse networks. And I think that's great for artists as well. So for example, if you're an artist and you may not have a gallery representing you at this time, but you still have like 20,000 Instagram followers, then you've got marketing and sales working for you, even if you're not present in the art market.
No, I totally agree. I think social media is so important for artists to build their own audience, and not totally rely on galleries to do all of that for them.
I agree. I think, and you're seeing that there are some artists I've spoken to, they're telling me, they sell 80% of their work through Instagram. So it's showing that you don't really need a gallery if you can succeed through other media.
So how many exhibitions do you get round a month now?
Yes, so there was a time when I estimated it was about 1,000 a year, but that was based on a pure ballpark figure, and I didn't have the stats to back it up. So this year I've decided I'm actually going to do a count. I'm going to tally as I go along. And so far, today being up till March the 10th, I've got 198 exhibitions. So that's roughly 80 a month, which would add up to about 1,000 a year. So that's so it's good to know that my original math made sense. Though I like to think that I'm cutting down a bit on exhibitions this year. And one of the funny things that's now started happening was I used to do multiple exhibitions every Saturday and every evening when I'm going to private views. But having been in the art world for this long, I now know a lot of people. So now it's harder for me to just pop in and just see the art and disappear without saying hello to anyone. And it also feels rude given the art world is so small and you probably see people once every 3 to 6 months that just say hi and bye. So I end up sticking around exhibitions for longer than I used to. I think it's a mixture because sometimes you are running into artists and they're not necessarily showing at the exhibition. They just happen to be seeing it at the same time as you. So it's just good to find out what's going on in their world. I often find that even if I'm at work and I suddenly duck into Mayfair for a few exhibitions over lunch break, I'll randomly run into people I know who aren't even with the gallery, who just happen to be doing the same. So the art world is very small and you keep crossing paths with the same people over and over.
And I know you visit all sorts of spaces, don't you? Because I know as much as you talk about the big galleries like the Royal Academy and the National Gallery, you visit quite a few project spaces as well?
Yeah, I think it's important to see all the different kinds of art. And of course, the big exhibitions are things that I'm going to be reviewing for places like Londonist, and they're the ones that generate the most traffic. But at the same time, you know, I've got multiple threads that I can use to expose artists to a wider audience. And I think it's important that you see it all. I also feel like because I came to art quite late in my 20s, I feel like I'm playing a lot of catch up with everyone else. So I feel like I need to go and see more than the average critic or the average art person, because they'll talk about an exhibition even as recent as, say, 2010, and that was before I started writing, so I wouldn't have seen it. And it feels like I'm actually still trying to catch up with people who've lived and breathed art for longer than I have, even if they're, say, 10 years younger than I am. So it's important to see all things. And also, it's great to see the journey of artists. So it's quite nice to see an artist who started off showing in some backstreet project space and now showing in, say, like a Mayfair gallery. And it's great to see that work progressing and growing with the industry. I mean, ultimately, that's how all of our networks started, isn't it? You look at people who seem to know all the people at the Blue Chip Gallery. I'm sure they were all towards the bottom end of the art world in the beginning, and they've all worked their way up.
How do you think they see you? I mean, do they look to you for validation? Are they, you know, when you're sort of meeting artists at galleries, whether it's their own exhibition or whether they're, you know, visitors themselves, do you find they're asking you to review their work, or, you know, are you just getting more and more invitations all the time to the next show?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of like, come see my show or come see my studio. It made me laugh recently. I posted an Instagram post of a show that a friend of mine had curated. And when she looked at the comments below, she's like, how many of these come see my show comments do you get on your posts? And I'm like, you haven't even seen my direct messages. So there's a lot of those. And people saying, oh, come and see my show, which is, you know, I mean, ultimately that's what I'm there for. So I don't mind it so much, in the sense that if it is an exhibition in London, then, you know, there's a good chance I can see it. I mean, if you start telling me about exhibitions in, say, Berlin or so on, then it's probably not relevant and I'll ignore it. Or if you just send work without any messages, which does happen a lot, I'm not sure what to do with that either.
I get that as well, honestly. Like people sort of just, yeah, messaging you straight away. What do you think of my work? You know, can I get some feedback? And it's like, well, you know, if you want a portfolio review, you can buy that service. You know, I do offer it.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, isn't it, where you think, what are they trying to get out of it? Are they trying to get someone to say your work is great? Is that looking for validation? And given that you don't know them personally, it's a shot in the dark, which to some degree you have to admire the bravery of throwing their art out there. It does feel like, well, you know, I don't know what to say to you in terms of what I think of the work. So if I don't like it, are you going to react badly? And also, what do you want? Like, one of the things I've always said, artists say to me, oh, you know, what do you think of my work? Well, my first question is, why are you making the work? If you're making the work because you love making art and that's all you care about, then what anyone thinks of the work doesn't matter. But if you want to sell the work, then that's a different conversation. Or if you want to develop your work into something new, then that's a third conversation. So there's lots of potential conversations there. And without pitching your work with the right one, I'm not sure where to take it. And even if you did, like you said, Geeta, you know, there's usually a charge for that service. So no, very few people are going to offer you free advice, you know, because it's not like most of us are sitting around twiddling our thumbs waiting for someone to send us their work. So yeah, I think it's just one of those, more context would always be helpful, and then you can have a conversation that starts from maybe a post to something greater over time if it works for both parties.
Yeah, I mean, I find that when, you know, people are reaching out to me and sort of asking me to review their work and things like that, it's really unclear what they want. But, you know, there is an undertone of like, well, can I get some help? But at the same time, you've got no context. So even if you are actually just reviewing the work just for the, you know, the work itself, it's like you say, you know, you don't know anything around anything sort of contextual around that or the artist. And for me, that, you know, that's also part of understanding the work, you know, getting to know the artist as well.
I agree, and but it's interesting to see that it's not just the two of us it happens to. Like, I've been in galleries talking to the gallerist, and somebody will just wander off the street with a portfolio of work, and even if the gallery's website says no solicit, you know, they don't take open calls or they don't have people drop in, it happens. I remember talking to someone at White Cube once, and they were saying sometimes they come to open up the gallery and there's just a wrapped up piece of work against the wall that says, "For the attention of Jay Jopling." So it does happen everywhere, and it's, I suppose, but I suppose at the same time, you know, you never know with those sorts of things. Maybe someone looks at the work and goes, "Actually, it's not bad," and maybe it is something we can look into. So
That
these
used to
things
happen all the time when I had the gallery space. Like, you know, every week we'd get sort of multiple people coming in. And I think one of the worst things was when they try and show you their work on their phone, because your phone is so small, and then they'll go, "Oh yeah," and it's a 6-foot abstract painting. It's like, okay, well, firstly, you're showing me on this like 4-inch phone. Secondly, you can see I don't show abstract work. Like, how do you think this is an appropriate fit? You know, this like lack of research around, you know, finding appropriate galleries is shocking, actually. But like you say, I do admire their bravery. You know, I think they've summoned a lot of courage to actually sort of pound the streets and walk into places.
I agree. It's one of those things where you think, yeah, there's some sort of admiration, but also there's some sort of, you could do your research better. Like you said, if a gallery doesn't show that kind of work, then pitching at them doesn't make a lot of sense. So it's just being a bit more intelligent about your pitching. I mean, I always joke that I get emails from lots of people around exhibitions going on, and some of them clearly haven't done their research, because it won't be an exhibition even in London. Or occasionally it'll be like, would you like an advanced copy of an erotic novel? And I'll be like, well, that's not really what I do. And I'm also a big fan of the mail merge gone wrong. You know, the one that says,
Oh yeah.
Dear insert name, I think this would make a great piece for Time Out. And it's like, well, I'll be sure to tell them.
Oh, the other one I get is when they've scraped your name off other sort of professional membership sites or something that I'm affiliated to. And then it's, you know, "Dear ladies, would you be interested in my work?" It
Yeah.
doesn't go down well. I think that one goes straight to the delete box. Okay, let's move on to, so obviously you're seeing tons of exhibitions. When we met recently, we were talking about how artists present themselves when we go and see them at both private views or fairs or anything like that. And I know you had some top tips, so let's go there.
Yeah, I suppose when you're going to a fair, especially a fair where you've paid to be part of it, which is more so than an exhibition. I mean, technically you haven't paid to be part of an exhibition either, but obviously you're represented here, you're presenting your best face. So when it comes to openings, I mean, number one, which is the really obvious one, is, you know, I mean, usually there is free flowing alcohol, but, you know, don't drink too much. You know, you want to make a good impression to anyone who turns up. And two, which is I've flagged to a lot of artists, is always look out for the sort of lone visitor, as it were, because often you go to private views and there's people socializing and chatting, but you can always tell the person who's interested in the art because they're actually looking at the art rather than looking at their friends and chatting to them. And if somebody's on their own and they've made a purposeful visit to come see the work, it usually means there's someone who's interested in art, whether it be buyer, gallerist, collector, critic. I mean, occasionally it may just be an enthusiast, but it means it's someone who's really into your work. So just make the rounds and make sure you speak to them all and find out what's going on. And I appreciate private views are busy, but feel free to take contact details if they're willing to give them. I remember one of the best examples I had of this was really early in my career. I was at a young artist show, which was having a solo show, and I went and said hello, and she was chatting to me, and she kept getting interrupted by lots of friends who wanted to say congratulations on your show, which is completely understandable. So she took my contact details, and then the next day she just followed up and said, look, I'm really sorry we didn't get a chance to chat properly. Let's go to another private view. I'm going to a friend's private view this night. Why don't we come along and then we can have a proper catch up? Which was a great idea, actually, because it meant that I got to see a show which was also what I wanted to do, mixed with actually catching up with this artist. So I didn't even have to go out of my way to catch up with her. She took me to a place where I wanted to go. So I thought that was a really good way of building a network. And speaking of taking contact details, one thing that I find always quite poor form is when somebody takes my contact details and I never hear from them until 6 months later when they've got a show, and suddenly they're like, hi, how are you? Hope you're well. I've got a show on. Why don't you come? And all the goodwill you built up from that first conversation we have feels like it melts away, because now it feels like you're very transparently only took my contact details just in case I might write about you, rather than trying to build some sort of ongoing relationship, which is the success to all businesses, actually, irrespective of the art world. If you want to build an ongoing relationship with someone, you make sure you put in the hours and you work at it, and follow up when someone gives you contact details.
So yeah, I guess you're on a ton of mailing lists.
Yeah, I'm on a lot of mailing lists, and it's one of the funny things is when if I fall off someone's mailing list, I won't notice. I genuinely won't notice, because if it's one of 200, how will I, until somebody says, oh, there's a good show at that gallery, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I've not seen anything about that gallery for months. I mean, sometimes it's because they've just closed down, and it does happen, and they don't tell anyone. But yes, you're having to look at lots of emails, and I have something that I refer to as the 3-second rule, which is when an email lands in my inbox, it has 3 seconds to make an impression, because otherwise I'm going to have to delete it, because that's all the time I have. I get close to 100 emails a day, and on top of my day job and going out to exhibitions, I have to manage those. So a few top tips I have on emails is, you'd be amazed at how many visual artists, the clue is in the first word, don't use an image. And you think, well, you're a visual artist. How am I supposed to just use text to discern whether I like your work or am going to like your work potentially? And the second element of that is the written context. So sometimes you have reams and reams of writing, and often I'm 3 paragraphs in and I have no idea what's going on. It's like really simple things like, are you a painter or a sculptor? I don't know yet, because you talk for 3 paragraphs about the origins of the inspiration for your work and how it's based on some school of philosophical thought. But I mean, what is it? I mean, I'm a big fan. I have been in the corporate world, so I'm a big fan of bullet points. I know the art world does not use bullet points, but I am a big fan of it. So, that's something that would work for me. Just like short, sharp bullets, this, right? I mean, another one that happens a lot is people send me a message saying, I've got an exhibition, here's an invite for the private view. And often, I mean, I'm usually booked up a month in advance. I can't make that private view. But if you had told me, here's a private view and here's the actual dates of the show, I might be able to make a later date. But often they don't even say that. So you're asking me to follow up and ask them, what are the dates? Which is an opportunity for that chain to be broken. I mean, just to put an old sort of customer service hat on, if you go to any big company's website or interface that they have on their telephone dial-in, they'll talk about you need to eliminate all the drop-off points. All the points where a customer may drop off from the journey and then not complete a sale is a bad thing. And that's why you got sort of Amazon one click, right? So it's the same when you're communicating with people. The more opportunities you get to allow someone to lose interest, the worse it is. So I often say, let me know well in advance. I hate somebody saying, I've got a show, it's already open, there's only a few days left. That's never helpful. And once it's open, send me images. So if I do want to use it in the top 5 or something, I've got the images there and I can just slot it in nice and easy. So often I'm trying to write about a show and I just can't even source an image. And often I'm writing on weekends when you might not have time to quickly turn around an email. So if I've got it to hand, that makes life a lot easier for me.
And what's your final tip?
So my final tip would be, we talked about going at your own private views and when you're representing yourself at a fair, but you can use the same technique when you're going to other openings as well. So I've met a lot of artists, not at their openings, but at openings they've been to, and it feels a lot more natural if you've got someone in common as well. Like the blind approach often feels like, I see you off the internet, and there's also this bizarre etiquette as to, how do you say hello to someone you recognize from Instagram? I'm not entirely sure I've got this down either, but often it's this person looking at me slightly oddly for a few seconds as their brain whirs into motion. And then when I look back at them, they kind of look at me and go, London art critic? And I'm like, yep, that's my handle. So that does happen. So it's surprising how often the art world's so small that if you do go to openings and other galleries, you will run into people who are helpful, influential, useful, and just generally good contacts to build up.
I think we've both started doing that on Instagram more recently, where we're actually sort of having pictures of ourselves in there rather than just the artwork that we're going to see and things as well. I've noticed that both on yours and on mine.
Yes, I've noticed that, and I think the rule is use more of yourself, really, because it tends to do better on Instagram. I know it's never been confirmed, but there is this view that the algorithms prefer faces over lack of faces. And also, people want to identify with you. People want to know who the person is they're following. And if they see you in the post, then it's like, oh, it's a real person rather than some machine posting every now and then.
Sort of accounts on Instagram, aren't there, where they've got, tens of thousands of followers, and then there'll just be like a picture of a room with one artwork and then 2 hashtags. And you go, well, is that a real person?
Yes, though I often joke that nowadays with bots getting so more and more sophisticated, it's becoming ever so harder to tell the difference between a bot and a slightly vacuous human being. So, when you sometimes get those comments, you go, is that a bot generated comment or is that a genuine person's comment? So, that makes me laugh.
But I was talking about this with somebody else around Instagram, and I know you and I have talked about it before as well, but feeling a responsibility to build an audience or a platform of our own. Like for me with the podcast, with you and your writing. How do you feel about that?
I think so. And I think it's also building an audience that is aligned to your taste as well, because everyone's got slightly different tastes. And one of the things that I think is very important for me to do is that the art world, I should use air quotes when I do that. There is this kind of view around what is and what isn't acceptable in the art world. And I often think it's quite snooty and quite elitist, while there are certain types of art that just won't cut it for them. So, for example, if you go to sort of like the more sort of Mayfair galleries, they will turn up their nose at anything that's kind of like street art style or in the affordable market or anything. It's really bizarre to be in a world where commercial is almost seen as a dirty word, and it's we're making money. So for me, I don't come with any of those pretenses. I don't think I do, because I've got a background outside the art world, so I can kind of cut through that nonsense and just share anything I enjoy. It doesn't matter if that gallery hasn't got a great reputation in terms of the art it shows. I like the show, so I want to show it, and that's something I can do through Instagram. And that's one of the reasons I so love being with Londonist, because it is got a massive reach, but also largely to a non-art crowd, and that's the people I want to reach. And the joke that we have in Londonist is because that's my attitude, is to refer to me as the people's art critic, which I quite enjoy as a title. So yeah, I kind of want to make sure that people are seeing every aspect of art and not just what's been deemed worthy by a sort of small crowd of people. I mean, one joke I often made was, you'll have an exhibition at a big institute and it will be curated by somebody who studied art history at the Courtauld Institute of Art. They'll then bring on board a PR person or a press person who also studied art history at the Courtauld Institute of Art, who will then pitch it to a bunch of journalists who also studied art history at the Courtauld Institute of Art. And surprise, surprise, everyone loves it. And it's because there's some sort of group thing. They're all thinking in the same way. And there's nothing wrong, like I said, with art history at the Courtauld Institute of Art, apart from the fact that I've said it too many times now. There's nothing wrong with the degree. It's a fine degree from a fine institution. But we need more diversity of thought in the art world. And so that's why I like to think that I come from a different angle. And I quite actually enjoy it when all the critics have panned an exhibition and I loved it, or all the critics have loved an exhibition, I panned it. I quite enjoy being on the wrong side because it shows that there is that discourse happening and it's not just some all mutual hate or love for a show.
I think I love that you actually have a platform to express that as well, because I was talking about this with, I think it was Gary, Gary Mansfield, when I was saying, this was my entry into the art world, was thinking that, well, to work at, in this industry, that you had to work at a museum, but all those jobs were taken by a handful of people from the same handful of universities. It's such a closed world.
It is. And, and I also find it strange that, the museum and gallery world is frankly quite underpaid, especially when you compare it to the corporate world. Yeah, it's so highly competitive. Like, to get into anything, everyone's doing unpaid internships. And I think that also leads us back to another form of elitism and kind of inner circle, in the sense that if you're from, say, a working class background, you wouldn't really be interested in the art world because not necessarily interested in the art world, because you have to work hard in unpaid positions for a long time before you can get anywhere. So what you end up with is a lot of sort of children of middle class parents who I'm sure will work very hard, but it means that there's another case of diversity of thought being weeded out in the art world, which isn't really good for it. And I think it's quite sad to see that, because I genuinely feel like art is for everyone and everyone should enjoy it. But if you look at the stats, it will show you that the people who go to art galleries tend to be upper middle class and largely white. That's quite sad for me, because I don't want it to be that way.
I agree. I think it's really interesting, isn't it? Like, because a lot of people that can afford to do those internships that, well, either unpaid or even the actual paid jobs are like so poorly paid, they're the people that have got a private income.
Yes, and I've spoken to a lot of people who've done that, who've struggled with that. I've spoken to galleries who've set themselves up with small business loans from the bank, and how feeling that it's you're yourself included, and it's quite sad, because you feel like you're fighting against galleries who are, I don't know, children or spouses of people who are very wealthy and therefore don't have to worry about making money. So they don't have to take their gallery to the affordable art fair, because it doesn't matter if they don't make money. While others, I think that's the place where I have to go because I need to make money to keep going. That's the only way I can survive.
And that's why I do a lot of the teaching around, actually, for artists to make a living out of selling their work, because I think the opportunities to sell directly now are much more than they ever were before. With social media, it's just opened it out. Like we said at the beginning, you can build your own audience and make those sales directly for artists. And it is actually available to more people if they just had the courage to actually step up and, show up on social media.
Yes, I agree. And I think there is a wonderful thing to say about the democratization of art through social media. And I think, it's given access to everyone. People can find you, they can buy from you. I think there are some people who are not entirely happy about it, and there are some downsides. So, for example, if your work is work that doesn't particularly appeal to social media, so let's say make kind of like minimalist work or something that's quite hard to get across, then yes, it may not necessarily benefit you in the same way someone who makes quite eye-popping, brightly coloured work. But I think the benefits do outweigh the downsides. And I think most people are starting to realize this. I think even now, I think all museum shows or big exhibitions are shying away from the no photos rule, because they realize actually people taking photos and sharing it on social is what will get more people to turn up. So
now the big museums also have hashtags that they actually want you to share to, sort of index that, index your photos, for their show, as you say, to get more people through the door.
I think so, because ultimately, I mean, I don't want to downplay my role as a reviewer and a critic, but if loads of your friends have shared photos of an exhibition and you look at the photos and think that looks great, but you've read the review in like the Telegraph or the Times or even mine and thought, well, actually his review said it was terrible, but my friend's photos showed that it looks good. Well, which one are you going to go with? And I think a lot of people will go with their friends' views of, this is the show that I want to see. So I think it's great. It obviously means critics may have less sway, but if that's the way the world's going, I'm not going to fight it.
Excellent. Tabish, where can people find you online?
Yeah, so online, London Art Critic is my handle on Instagram and Twitter, and I'm also tabish-khan.com is my website, with links to londonist.com and fadmagazine.com, which is the two websites that I write for.
And you can follow me on Instagram at the Gita Joshi. Tabish, thanks so much for being on the podcast. It's been great talking to you, and I can't wait to see you soon.
Thank you very much.